Welcome to Thought Crime and Keto Crime, where Tracy does the sleuthing so you don't have to.
Jim Jones, probably the most well-known cult leader of all time. Well,
Yes.
maybe except for Charles Manson, but
Mm-hmm.
I think there's probably a tie there. But
I feel a little bit like Jim Jones and Charles Manson are different kinds of cult leaders, you know?
yeah,
And like
definitely.
their cult style was different. So first and foremost, Jim Jones looks like Elvis or something.
Yeah.
Or like a
Powers
George.
Booth, who played him in like
Uh-huh.
the distinctive movie about Jim Jones from the 80s, was a dead ringer for him. Dead ringer. It's
No kidding.
So every time I see a picture of Jim Jones, I think Powers Booth. Every time I see a picture of Powers Booth, I think Jim Jones. It's just spooky.
I would have to look up Powers Booth, but I believe you. But
He played
the
evil dad in Nashville.
I watched one episode of Nashville.
Okay, well, never mind. Just look it up.
Sorry, I'll look it up later.
He was in Red Dawn.
Whenever when I think of like cult leaders like this, I just think of like long-haired hippies in robes, and that was not the case for this, and that's weird.
It was a cult, but like you said, unlike the Manson family, I think the Manson family was more a social phenomenon, like a product of the 60s. I don't think that would have happened in any other era.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, the People's Temple could happen in any era. Anytime you have
I think so, yeah.
downtrodden people, I could see that happening.
So look out, everybody.
Yeah. Don't join any strange churches.
If anybody asks you on the street if you'd like a spaghetti dinner or something, just say no.
Yeah, let it go.
Don't go. Don't go with him. I know you're sad. Don't eat their spaghetti.
So he was born in actually May 13th, so coming up on his birthday, 1931 in Crete, Indiana.
Is he still alive?
Who?
No, that was the stupidest question ever that I just asked you.
If he is, it's a hell of a trick.
Jesus Christ. No, never mind. Forget I said anything. I'm back.
I'll cut that out, don't worry.
Just leave it. It's fine. Let's give the listeners an idea of what my mental state is right now.
But his parents...
So Crete, Indiana.
His parents were pretty far apart in age. His dad, James Thurman Jones, was 12 years older than his mother, Lynetta. Lynetta was from a middle-class family with a stepfather that did very well in business. So she had a lot of what you would consider upper middle-class upbringing. Really wanted to go into business for herself, wanted to be an entrepreneur, never intended on marrying or having children, very much a feminist, just wanted to be on her own. And then her mom died, and something in her shifted where she thought maybe she does need to get married and have a family. So she basically rushed into marriage with this older man. He was not a nice guy.
How old she was about?
She was in her early 20s when they married. Excuse me, mid 20s when they married. So he was in his 40s easily. So yeah. So she rushed into marriage with this older guy. He was a World War I veteran, suffered with lung ailments. They didn't say what it was. They just said a disease of the lung. So I'm going to guess COPD or emphysema, maybe severe asthma. And was also a farmer, not a good combination. And basically they owned a bankrupt farm because this was Depression era. And think of Mice and Men. You know, they were in Indiana, Dust Bowl, very solitary. So she finally gave birth to Jim. She had a dream telling her that she would give birth to a great man, celebrity man. She did. And eventually they gave up farming, and actually their farm got foreclosed on, and they moved to Lynn, Indiana, which was actually where both his family was from. A population of about 1,000 people, but they had 20 churches. Which is so typical of a Midwestern or Southern
town. Honestly, yeah, that doesn't shock me at all. I feel like the expected reaction was, oh, that's a lot of churches, but that doesn't.
When you're from the South, you don't
Shock me.
Indiana's one of those strange states that's kind of part Southern, part Midwestern.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, I do know.
I mean, the part that's back near Kentucky, very definitely Southern. Then you get into some more Midwestern area as you go further north, but it's still all kind of country.
And despite what people want to say, I feel like a fair amount of cultural overlap in Midwestern and Southern.
Oh yeah,
so.
Yeah. Depending on what anybody wants to say, there's a lot of
there's differences, but a lot of it is very similar.
Yeah, there's overlaps between, in my opinion, between Southern white culture, like Southern working class culture, and urban African American culture. If you look at the food, especially, exactly the same.
There was that one Saturday Night Live sketch.
Yeah.
That really.
Yeah.
Yes, you're correct.
And if you look at the way they handle their religion, a lot of Pentecostalism, which we will talk about in this. And then if you look at, all this fits into this story, y'all. We're not just babbling. And then if you look at the music, hip hop and rap talk about the struggles of the working class person, the average person. So does country music. A lot of similarities there.
Yeah.
So
interesting. So all right. So they're in Indiana, in a place that has more churches than people.
Definitely. He was a very intelligent child. Learned to walk way before most children do. But Lynetta wasn't such a good mother. She had to make the living because she was married to kind of a deadbeat who wouldn't work and drew a little bit of not that people on disability are deadbeats, but he was capable of doing something, but wouldn't. So he preferred just to get a few pennies from the government instead of actually going to work, but he could afford to get up every morning and drag his butt down to a card hall to play cards all day while his wife worked 2 jobs.
I feel like I did read about that, yeah.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, Lynn, Indiana was a dry county. Prohibition did not affect them because they didn't even know when it began or ended because they were always dry. And the pool hall, card hall he would go to was like just a place where people would get together and drink soda pop and play cards. It was just a bar without alcohol, basically.
That has like real strong church basement vibes.
Yeah, it does in a very sick way. James, his father was from a Quaker family, believe it or not, and Lynetta grew up Methodist. But neither of them really were religious. It was pretty much an agnostic household. And Jim grew up, with a smattering of all kinds of religions. A neighbor by the name of Mrs. Kennedy, Myrtle Kennedy, who lived across the street, was a devout Nazarene, her and her husband. And she took pity on Jimmy because she was tired of seeing him out all day with no supervision. She would see him dirty. There would even be like excrement on the bottom of his pants sometimes where he was his father was at home out playing cards. His mom was at work. So he was just there. He learned to walk by pushing himself on a little red cart. Like he had a little red wagon they would push. And Myrtle witnessed one day him play near the train tracks, and she was on her way out the door to go get him. Train comes by, grabs the cart, like the cow catcher on the back of the truck, on the back of the train car, got hold of his cart, jerked his cart away from him. He goes tumbling over, and that train drags his cart away. After she saw that, she was determined she was going to raise this child. So she basically took this child into her home, and basically he was there all the time because his parents weren't home. And as a result, she taught him about the Bible. She took him to church, at the Nazarene church with her, and he grew up with an understanding of religion.
Yes.
And he was an avid reader, very good reader, but he liked things that you wouldn't consider an average child to like. He read Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. He was supposedly he was a fan of Hitler's oratory skills and his ability to be Machiavellian, not necessarily his worldview.
Everyone should have known this man was destined to lead a cult. All signs point to future cult leader here.
Yeah. He also read books by Chairman Mao, Gandhi, of course, Karl Marx, and Stalin and Lenin. Read all the greatest hits. In school, as he got older toward high school, he started talking a lot about socialism and communism because he grew up very poor. He believed that that was the way to go. And as a result, didn't make too many friends in Lynn, Indiana.
I would imagine not.
Yeah. So he admired the Soviet Union for the amount of order they brought to people's lives, at least what he saw as order.
Sure.
And also became fanatically religious. So he started going around to all types of different churches, in addition to the Church of the Nazarene, where where Myrtle took him. He went to Methodist, he went to the Quaker Church, and he also got involved with a Pentecostal church that was sort of the outcast church. This is where all of the hillbillies from Tennessee and Kentucky that came to Indiana went. So he got in with them, and a preacher there, a female preacher. I don't know why they had to mention she was female, but they didn't name. They just said female preacher.
Because that's kind of a big.
It's kind of a taboo.
Yeah, that's because it's
in the 1940s.
Shocking. Yeah, that's shocking. In a Pentecostal church?
Yeah. And she took an interest in him and realized he had a huge amount of oratory skills because he would, he would participate at like 8, 9, 10 years old. And she groomed him to be a child preacher and was actually using him as an attraction to bring people into the church.
That's like movie plot stuff.
Yeah, that's like the plot.
I say that every time we talk, but
that's like the plot to Children of the Corn, like Isaac's origins. That was exactly Isaac's origins. So
crazy.
Yeah. And
so then he eventually kind of went with Methodism.
Yeah, he did.
For a hot second.
Growing up, he went with Methodism because that was what his mother was, and he kind of went, and he ended up marrying a woman that was devout Methodist. So for a while, he went the Methodist route. And but the thing of it was, he was an atheist.
Yes, this is like this man is so full of contradictions. It makes your head spin.
Yeah,
it makes your head spin. And because, like, well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it all.
I think for him, that because he came from a very poor family, I think he saw the church as a way because he admired people like Stalin, Lenin, Adolf Hitler, Gandhi, great speakers. As much as Hitler was evil and Stalin was evil and Lenin was quasi-evil, there's a backstory to Lenin.
There's a spectrum,
yeah. They were great orators. And so he saw the church as a way to hone those skills, I think, number one. And number two, I think he saw it as a vehicle to promote socialism and communism and a social agenda.
Which is very easy to do if you're looking at particularly the New Testament, right, as a religious text.
If you look at Jesus, Jesus
pretty
much preached a socialist agenda.
Yeah, so that's it's a small jump.
Yeah, it is a small jump
from one to the other. All right, so what time period are we at now?
Okay, so we just gave a brief overview of his. There's lots of stories from his childhood, which I'll cover in my intro episodes. But mainly we're up to high school, where he excelled at academics so much that he actually, his parents divorced in 1948. His parents divorced.
Okay, so when he's endish of high school,
yeah, pretty much. And he and his mother moved to Richmond, Indiana, which was a much larger town, a much larger city, a lot of industry.
Mm-hmm.
At the age of 16, he got a job as an orderly in a hospital and got really interested in science and things like that. Now, as a child, remember we talked about religion. As a child, he used to walk around and preach sermons on the streets. He would preach sermons. He held
Mm-hmm.
church in a loft in their barn out back and had funerals for animals. Some say he killed some of the animals to make that happen, which was a whole different problem.
Doesn't surprise me at all.
No, it doesn't. But these children would actually come and listen to his sermons, and he would help them with their homework and stuff. And then he started kind of lording religion over them because they played cards and played sports and things like that. He was a weird child. That's the point I'm trying to get across. He was known as the weird child in Lynn, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
But he got a job in a hospital, graduated from high school early at the age of 17
Mm-hmm.
because he was very intelligent, very smart. While at the hospital, he met a young woman by the name of Marceline, who he would eventually marry. She was 4 years older than him. And she was from a devout Methodist family. Her father was a Republican politician in Richmond, knew all the right people in Richmond. And so Jim, I think in a way, Jim saw her as an in with the powerful people in town. And so he actually left for a little while, went to Bloomington, enrolled at the Indiana University studying business. They still dated from afar, then got married, and she went back to Bloomington with them. And then that's when he switched his major from business to social sciences. They went to Indianapolis, where he was intending on going to law school, and he started street preaching. In addition to working, both of them working 100 different jobs to
stay afloat,
and quasi-adopting a cousin of hers, which didn't work out too well, but that's, again, a story for the overall arc. There's a lot of material here. I know it seems like we're rushing, but to our viewers, but if you've been watching any of the others, you know this is an incredibly long story.
Yeah. So it says like in 1952 he becomes a student Methodist pastor.
Yep.
But then leaves that church because they won't allow him to integrate the congregation.
Exactly. He had quite a following at one of the more popular Methodist churches there in Indianapolis, and they wouldn't let him integrate, so he, as a reason of conscience, he left.
Which I was really surprised to learn that kind of stuff. Although, as we will discuss a little bit later, in practice, maybe not so egalitarian, but at least intellectually, he knew that was wrong, and or pretended he knew that was wrong. I don't know. So then he got the Community Unity Church. Right.
It was he rented a community center, and it was an interdenominational church where he basically started almost a daycare. It wasn't quite a daycare. It was more of an educational center for children of all races, which was unheard of. And he kind of had church members oversee it. He gained a huge foothold in the African-American community with that. And actually had a lot of them from the Methodist church that he left follow him over there.
Yeah. And this is around the time that he starts just straight up fake faith healing.
Oh, God, yeah. Staging it.
Is honestly my favorite thing.
It's my favorite thing about him.
Saw some faith healing on TV or something, or like from a tent revival or whatever.
Yep. I can do that.
I was like, great, we're doing that now, because he knows that like it dazzles people and he's going to gain followers. And so they've like chicken livers and stuff that they're like pretending to pull out of people, and they're like, this is your cancer, and they're planting moles in the audience so that no one knows that the people that are being pulled up aren't like locals and aren't whatever.
Right. And when he thought people were catching on to that, he actually went to a religious conference and did faith healing there, and so he could do it in front of skeptics. And what he was doing is having, just fellowship with all these people out there, talking to him.
Mhm.
He was taking notes.
Mhm.
And then he would get up on stage and call people out by name. I know you have headaches, because he's just been talking to these people.
Yeah.
And that's a trick that like Oral Roberts was caught doing, Peter
Yeah.
Popoff, you know.
It's very similar to it's like cold reading, like psychics do.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
They gather
which is
information about you.
honestly, it's like it's so duplicitous and scammy and gross, but fascinating and a great. I mean, like a great party trick, right?
Oh, it
Like
is.
you suck if you build a business and a life around parting people from vulnerable people from their money because you're
I
good at lying to
I
them.
agree. The only
But
time that
like,
I would disagree is if you are a party psychic that says this is for entertainment purposes only. Don't take anything I say seriously.
yes.
I don't have a
Well,
problem with that. But if you
I
set up a,
feel,
you know,
yeah, it's a
there's
whole
a
thing.
fine line.
Yeah, the biggest problem to me is when it's like people who are clearly grieving
Yeah.
and you're like, yeah, yeah, sure, it's your
It's like Miss Cleo. She wasn't a
good
psychic at
sister.
all. She was an actress
Mm-hmm.
that played that part very well.
Didn't she go to jail for that or
She
something?
was
Get in
named in
trouble?
a civil suit, but I don't think she ever actually
Yeah.
went to jail.
Well, all right. Clearly, that story got out of hand in my
Sorry.
head.
Well,
All
what's
right.
ironic,
So,
ironically, you should bring that up because Jim Jones actually went to a spiritual conference and actually
uh-huh.
got deemed there as clairvoyant because of what he was doing. So he was pulling the same
Yes.
shit at a spiritual conference.
So the way that my notes go for this is 1954, fake faith healing is in all caps, Community Unity Church.
Yep.
Then we've got him buying a church in 1956 called Wings of Deliverance
That became
that
People's
then
Temple.
becomes People's Temple Full Gospel Church. And then it just says, now he's clairvoyant?
Yeah, he went to
Thing
a
that I
like
was reading just kind of dropped it in there. Was like, and then he was like, "Oh, and now he's claiming to be
yeah.
clairvoyant."
Then he went
Oh,
to a
okay,
New
great,
Age conference and they told him he was clairvoyant,
cool.
basically.
It just came out. I was like, "Oh, all right, great. He's clairvoyant now. Awesome."
Right. But what was interesting about all of that is that his reasoning for going around to the different, like, before he even started the First Unity Church, he was going from church to church trying to gather men. He was basically trying to steal members, and he was succeeding because he had like half the people of that Methodist church left because they also believe that if you're Christian, you should be integrated. And then he went to these Christian conferences and picked up a lot of African American because he was starting to do a lot of outreach to the community. Humanitarian work, especially in poor Black neighborhoods, gets you a lot of credit, street credits. And
Yeah,
that's what he
so
was
he's
doing.
got quite a lot. So then things are starting to get a little dicey at this point.
Yes.
Things are
Let's just say by
starting.
1954, 1955, he had a growing church at the People's Temple. He had started a couple of nursing homes to care for the elderly that Marcy and Marcy's parents were running, which were actually turning a profit. So the church had a influx. Then he started talking about how the church should be your life. It should be even more important than your family. And
So no more having sex. We
nope,
are adopting
celibacy
children only.
because the world is overpopulated.
We are only adopting children. We're not doing it anymore. And it says here around 59 was when he starts really isolating church members.
Right. He built his inner 100 people, his inner
quote
100.
unquote, your quote unquote family.
Yeah.
And so you're spending your Thanksgiving and Christmas with your new family, your chosen
not your old family. And he started kind of breeding hostility, I think, with his members towards their family if their family didn't agree with what they were doing. Well, you don't need them. This is your family. What's ironic, during that whole celibacy thing, his wife got pregnant.
I mean,
and he had to admit that, in front of his church.
See, I'm honestly shocked that he did not
say that was an
well, it
immaculate
happened
conception.
before.
Immaculate
Shocked,
conception.
honestly.
I know he missed an opportunity.
Yeah.
But
then in go ahead.
No. Did you read about Father Divine? Father Divine was he was an evangelist that actually claimed to be God. He was an African American evangelist that had built this huge empire in New York. He even, like, when his wife died and he married a younger white woman. The reason I say white woman is it's just so comical what comes next. When his wife died, his wife of 30 years died, and he remarried this very young, pristine Canadian woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. He said it was because the spirit of his dead wife had entered her body, and he was actually just remarrying his ex-wife.
Oh. Well.
Perfectly believable.
Okay, that seems. I don't understand what your problem with that is, Tracy. That's.
I don't care if he remarries. Honestly, his wife's dead. That's his right. But
Right, yeah, right. Like, who cares at that point? Even in church, they say till death do you part.
Yeah.
You're home free after when you.
Jim Jones went up to New York and Philadelphia to meet with this guy, and this guy kind of rubbed off on him his doctrine of celibacy and complete devotion to the church. Even though this guy was a capitalist, he still promoted a communist worldview. So Jim Jones took all that to heart and realized that his goal was to be as big as Father Divine. And so that's when he came back and started with all the crackpot ideas back in Indiana.
Yes. Right. So people are now isolated from their, like, old stupid families, and now they've got this new great family.
Right.
So allegedly. And then it says here in, like, 1960, he does kind of a big switch from where we got like a big change from, like, a Christianity-based thing to he's just like, oh, did I not mention that I was an atheist this whole time? I'm the Christ-like figure, actually.
Right. It is about this time he got ran out of Indiana. Well, hostilities, because Indiana was a very big Ku Klux Klan state. People don't realize that the hotbed of Ku Klux Klan activity from the 20s to the 60s was in Indiana. And so an integrated church.
Not all hot dish.
No. An integrated church with communist views in Indiana wasn't very welcome. And so their church got vandalized. And it's about this time that Jim Jones started to have more paranoia. Like, he'd always had a little bit of paranoia, but it really started to get to him. He started worrying about the Cold War, nuclear war. And so he read in a magazine that
yes, I love this.
there were like 7 places. Yeah. Go ahead.
That word would in the event of a nuclear event would be the best places to be, and one of them was in Redwood Valley, California.
Ukiah, California. He originally wanted to go to Brazil, and he sent a delegation down to Brazil, but even Brazilians were freaked out by their weirdness and wouldn't let them in. So, okay,
California won't let anybody in, though.
Exactly.
California takes everybody.
So they went to Ukiah, California, and he was already allegedly having affairs with many, many women and many, many men. So.
Yes, and so my note here just says, goes to California to be nuts there. This particular brand of crazy wasn't working in Indiana anymore.
So they developed kind of a little commune.
California, here I come. Yes.
In Ukiah, which is in the Bay Area, a small town.
In the mid-60s, yeah.
Right. And then they decided that they pulled it out. Those small towns in you've got LA, you've got San Francisco, you've got Oakland, all big, liberal, progressive cities, but all around there, you've got conservative areas.
Right.
All the rules. They were smack dab in the middle of another conservative area, which reared up the locals really good. And he pulled as many in as he could. He got people off drugs and stuff like that, pulled them in, but also kind of took them over in a way. But then he decided he had depleted his supply of people in California, or in that area in California. So he decided to go over to San Francisco, which welcomed him with open arms.
Gangbusters in San Francisco.
Exactly.
San Francisco was ready for Jim Jones.
Yep, and he was ready for San Francisco.
He was ready for San Francisco.
He moved the People's Temple into a huge church in downtown San Francisco. He did a lot of humanitarian outreach in the Tenderloin, which is the slum area of San Francisco. It was, now you got to remember, a lot of people probably think, so his church just up and moved, they could all just sell their houses up and move. What was going on is, if you remember of Jim Jones Church,
buses, bro.
You probably had already signed your house over to him, your paychecks went to him, your social security went to him. It was a true socialist type of commune where you gave him everything and he made sure you had your needs met. So when he said move, you move.
And you got to take a bus.
You got to take a bus to Ukiah, California and be crazy.
Everybody got to go in the bus.
So then they go over to San Francisco.
And then eventually Los Angeles as well.
Yeah, Los Angeles as well.
Little like satellites.
Yep.
The bus, and they're like touring around in their buses,
promoting his agenda, bringing new members into the church, always under the guise of it being a Christian organization. No one knew it was really a socialist or communist organization. Not really. There wasn't a whole lot of God. Jim Jones was the only God. And then he got into politics.
Then gets into politics. So I just, right quick, I've got some stuff here. So we touched on this a little bit earlier, and I said we'd probably talk about it later. Like the way that the hierarchy of the organization was, even though it was integrated and had been for decades at this point, like in practice, the people at the top that had all the power were almost exclusively white people, and the people at the bottom, the troops, quote unquote troops, who had less power and just kind of followed orders or whatever, were mostly people of color.
Yep.
Which is only
there had ever only been like one black person in his whole hierarchy, and he had an associate pastor way back at the very first People's Temple that was a black man. But after that, no more.
No more, right. So in theory, yes, egalitarian organization, race means nothing here. In practice, it says like they had a dorm at Santa Rosa Junior College.
Yeah, they ran an educational center and
like care homes and stuff, and actually like we're helping people.
They did a lot of good things. They really did. And the thing of it is, if Jim Jones snapped his finger, he could have 1,000 people where he needed them to be within just an hour or so.
Yes, and that was one of the things that helped him get into politics. It was very attractive to other movers and shakers to know that if they had Jim Jones on their side, that they say we need 2,000 people tomorrow to show up for whatever, and it's done.
Tony got elected mayor of San Francisco, and Harvey Milk got his city council seat. It was a lot to do with Jim Jones,
which is crazy. And also, sweet Rosalind Carter, just constantly involved with people like Jim Jones.
Oh yeah, gotta go outside. She's got her call starting. A lot of the big progressive movers and shakers had a relationship with Jim Jones in the 60s. It's very weird.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. Willie Brown, the alderman from San Francisco that did so much progressive things for the Tenderloin, he praised Jim Jones openly about what he was doing. African American community.
Sounds like a lot of people.
Yeah.
Did. So then he becomes the chairman. Jim Jones becomes the chairman of the San Francisco Housing Authority Commission
under Mazzoni.
I was like, all right.
And he
I had no idea when I was reading this stuff.
Yeah, and he was huge in San Francisco politics, and he staffed that division with all Temple members. So not only was he the head of it, everybody that worked for it was under his thumb, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and then things are getting dicey for him starting 74-ish.
Yeah. You started having, we're going to start with a few people starting to leave the temple because of the abuses, the overwork, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse. Downright, his accusations of downright murder, when he would kill people that he felt were, or have people killed. It was always allegedly.
Yeah. Right.
That he would have people killed. In reading, I found out
knowing
that
what we know now, I feel like is probably 100%
absolutely,
true.
absolutely. There was a family by the name of Houston that was a huge member of the temple in San Francisco. The oldest son, Bobby, was found killed mysteriously. He'd had a job on the railroad, was found killed mysteriously at the railroad. And I come to find out that person was my fifth cousin. So you find out. I'm not. We're both great grandniece and nephew of Sam Houston. I've known for a long time I was related to Sam Houston, of Houston, Texas, and so was he. Okay. So I had a cousin in the People's Temple.
So you have a common ancestor way back, and then your branches went this way.
Yeah,
that's
distant cousin.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I found out that there's more crazy in my family than I ever realized.
Well, I think that if any of us dig deep enough, there's always something back there.
Exactly. And then the Republican or very conservative politicians that he had wronged in trying to get all the progressives that he helped get elected. In fact, in many cases, his constituent, his flock, as he called them, was the deciding factor in many elections. So
I would imagine. So, and there is a lot of speculation about what the numbers, how big the flock actually was, because he tried to say that it was 20,000 people.
Right.
Reality, probably more like 5.
Right. But then there was allegations of maybe they weren't actually registered to vote in the districts that they voted, that maybe some of them voted twice or 3 times. A lot of allegations of voter fraud there. I mean, allegedly, I don't know. But of course, you have the conservative and the Republican politicians that lost their seats as a result, direct of let's get him kind of attitude.
Yes. So they sign a lease in 1974 for the People's Temple Agricultural Project, aka Jonestown, in Guyana. He doesn't go there yet.
No, he sends pretty much, think of like the 100, the TV show, the 100. He sends a couple of hundred of his most trusted people down there to get it started.
But he is still in San Francisco at this point. But the heat is on.
He knows he's going to have to get out of San Francisco because it's getting dicey. His enemies are starting to surround him just a bit. Whether that actually happened or not, because his paranoia is off the chart.
Right.
I know.
But so I know there was a a journalistic series.
San Francisco Chronicle.
That's the one.
Right.
That's the one that was sort of an expose, and it was the first expose of him in the People's Temple, and he was not happy with it, and so he didn't run all of it.
Correct. He tried to get it stopped several times. It was a reporter that had actually went undercover and pretended to be joining the temple, and also then a bunch of people that had left the temple that he had gotten interviews with. It was 2 reporters that actually teamed up and did this. And he tried to use his power with the mayor, with the council, with everybody to get it stopped, and they couldn't stop it. So he calls the newspaper the night before the first article's going to run, and the reporter actually reads it to him over the phone.
And that is when he allegedly is on the phone with the reporter and writes a note that essentially says, "Ready the airplane, we're going to Guyana." Yeah. like start the chopper, we're out of here.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happened. The next day, he and his advisors and family that were still in San Francisco boarded a plane and went to Guyana.
Yes. So by late 1978, there are over 900 people living in Guyana in Jonestown.
Exactly. And it's kind of closed off. It's
Mm-hmm.
I've read interviews with people that are survivors. Now you have to take it with a grain of salt because they were people that left because of strife and what have you. But knowing what we know, I have to believe it's true that before he got here, like many of these people were in the first couple of hundred people that went down.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a socialist paradise. They were there
Mm-hmm.
together. They were all equal. They worked 7-8 hours a day together, getting stuff done. They ate plenty of food, blah, blah, blah. And then when he got there, it
Yeah,
was
it all went to
instant.
shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was really, I mean, it was all about him being the boss, really.
Exactly. He loved to control people.
Yes.
Couldn't stand the idea of people leaving him. His wife had reportedly tried to leave him several times. A couple of times he threatened suicide if she'd left and she felt bad and wouldn't leave. And then the last time he threatened to kill her if she left. And she was scared of it, so she stayed. Poor Marceline.
I know. She poor thing. She hitching her wagon into that star. She just thought she just thought she was marrying this
a great guy.
Superstar pastor.
Yeah, he was this progressive, forward-thinking minister in training when she met him. Come out after she realizes
head of hair.
Yeah, had a great head of hair. The raven hair is what they called it because it all swooped back. So he had this great head of hair, was handsome, progressive minister. She's pretty religious herself, and then finds out atheist, crazy commie.
It's all a lie, except for the
womanizer, bisexual.
Everything but the great hair was a lie.
Yep. And he was reportedly bisexual. He had affairs with men and women. Not that there's anything wrong. I claimed to be a bisexual for years, but so there's definitely nothing wrong with that. It is a real thing. It's just I was in denial, but nothing wrong with that. But he used it for manipulation.
It feels like to me like something you would share with your spouse.
Definitely. So
it wasn't a surprise.
Right.
But I share a lot of things with my spouse and other people don't.
Too.
I don't know.
So he gets there and all of a sudden they're working 16 hours a day, being fed rice 3 times a day and only about a cupful. So they were starving to death.
This is like September or October of 78, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a very short period of time. Is my understanding between when he gets there and when it happens.
Exactly. Like but they grew their own crops, but they didn't grow enough to sustain the village, so they still had to buy stuff.
Right.
But at this time, he had everybody's paid Social Security checks coming in from the mainland. But what he didn't realize is when he moved all of his congregants down there, he had relied so much on the congregants that worked a day job, quote unquote, plus put in 8 or 10 hours with the temple at night, their paychecks going directly to him, that when he moved them all to Guyana, those jobs were gone. They were no longer getting paychecks. So he was literally just sustained by real estate investments that he still had, plus the elderly Social Security checks coming in. So money became a problem.
Which is not that much.
No.
Yes.
Money became a problem, and as a result, he was having to starve them to death because there wasn't enough to feed them.
Well, I mean, some people would say that there were probably lots of other choices that he could have made, but
starve
I'm no economist.
Yeah,
I don't know. Starving.
Yeah. Well, lots of things weren't as they had been promised, and all the time his paranoia is getting worse and worse. As soon as somebody gets there, they take their passports and all their ID from them, so they literally are trapped in a foreign country.
Oh, so scary.
Yep.
So scary.
And
to ever have to even just to hand over your passport to someone to make a copy of it, which is something that they do like in a lot of hostels and stuff overseas.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't really actually want you to take my passport for me. I know that you're going to give it right back, but I don't.
Right. But I
want you
needed to get out of this country.
I need it. Yeah, like terrifying. Anyway.
So pretty much kept them as slaves, worked them like dogs.
So this is, like I said, it goes south incredibly quickly.
He dissolved all marriages. Like he dissolved all marriages and told them that he would repair them with appropriate mates. Can you imagine?
I'd be pissed.
Oh, no.
I'd be like, I worked really hard on this one.
I don't want another one.
No, I don't. Yeah,
No.
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah. So anyway, reports are coming out of Guyana that terrible human rights atrocities are taking place in Jonestown.
Right. Rumors
People
left.
who are left behind.
Yeah. People that perhaps he didn't let go to Guyana. Perhaps they're angry.
But it's becoming increasingly clear to the powers that be here in the United States that some shit is going down
in South America.
In South America, and like they should probably intervene. Like American citizens are.
Yeah. Because look how suspect he left.
Slaves in South America.
He left the night before that article dropped. So whatever parts of that series of articles were published, he wasn't even there to make a statement. He just took off. So of course you assume
it was supposed to be like 5 or 7 installments, and they ran 2 or 3 of them,
right,
or something. I don't know. I don't remember the specific numbers, but right. It certainly looks. His behavior certainly is not that of a man who is not doing terrible things.
Exactly. And so you have Congressman Leo Ryan, a California state representative that he represents a great majority of San Francisco and the Bay Area. So a lot of his constituents are there. Their families are concerned
He's like,
about.
I'll just go see.
Yeah, let me go see.
Yeah. He's like, I'll just go down there and I'll just check it out.
Exactly. And so he takes a delegation of him. His assistant goes with him. There's reporters from NBC, the gentleman that wrote the book I'm currently finishing on the subject, as well as several other reporters, photographers, and family members of people that live there that are wanting to check on their relatives, and they fly down to Ghana just to check it out.
Yes, just to check it out. So then while they're there, several members are like, take us with you back to the United States.
They go in, they have a very nice, first Jim Jones wasn't going to let them in, then he did. But then he let them in. They had a very nice party. Some people said they loved it, and then he started getting notes passed to him by people that wanted to get out of there. And he tells Jones that as a representative of the government of the United States, he's going to ask who wants to go back. And he did.
Which Jim Jones does not like.
He doesn't like people that aren't loyal.
Yes.
And he asks, I think it's 15 or 20 people want to go back.
I have something like that.
Yeah.
So Leo Ryan shows up on November 17th.
Exactly.
And he's going to do a turnaround on November 18th and come back.
Right. With anybody that wants to return.
With anybody who wants to come back. Which does not happen.
No, unfortunately, even before the congressman leaves, there's some scuffles when some parents try to take their children, because evidently the children are kept in like a centralized location. They're all raised together, like that whole takes a village kind of thing. Well, they actually do that. And so there's some scuffles between Marceline, who just loves the children because, she's a child person. There's a scuffle between the temple members that raise the children and their actual parents that are trying to take them because they're leaving. So that breaks out in a little bit of violence. And then another gentleman attacks the congressman with a knife. Not a good scene.
No, but then they get out and they are at the airstrip.
Right, and there's two. They're
ready
waiting
to get
on
on that plane.
There's waiting on a second plane because there wasn't enough room on the first plane. And as they're starting to board that plane,
They are met by temple, quote unquote, security guards.
Right, in a tractor trailer, a tractor pulling a trailer. And according to the
and
film,
they open fire.
They opened fire. There's actually film footage of the NBC photographer that got a lot of it on film before he was killed. But they started shooting and they kill 5 people.
Horrifying.
Yep. They killed 5 people.
Leo Ryan.
Congressman Ryan, and they shot his assistant twice. She was actually shot. Anybody that they shot from a distance that fell over, they came up to literally and fired a second shot into their head to finish them off. That's how deliberate it was. Anybody that survived were the people that just took off running for the woods. I mean, for the jungle. Tim Reederman, the guy that wrote the book that I'm reading or finishing, he said that when the firing started, his instincts just took over. First, he hid behind the wheel of one of the planes. And when he saw the congressman go down, all he could think of was run. It was just like adrenaline.
Just took off. Yeah.
He took off into the jungle, fell, hit his head, and was out. And he woke up and it was dark. And he actually got up and walked back to the airstrip. All he could do at that point was take pictures of the scene and wait.
I mean,
yeah.
Wow.
Wait with a bunch of dead bodies.
Harrowing and incredible.
Yeah.
God. Yeah. But no, that's not enough.
That's not and enough. There's more. Wait, there's more.
That's
back at Jonestown. Back at Jonestown, Jim Jones pulls one of his famous white knights. Now, white knights was code for mass suicide. He had actually been floating the idea of them all killing themselves on several occasions.
I had come up several times.
Right. And he would do these practice runs where they would all gather to do it, and then nothing would happen. Well, he calls one, and this time it happens, unfortunately. Cyanide and barbiturates and sleeping pills, which are technically barbiturates, are all crushed up and put into a punch-like solution.
A grape flavored flavor aid.
Exactly. It's not even...
Couldn't even spring for the name brand Kool-Aid.
You're gonna kill me. You can't even spend an extra 2 cents on Kool-Aid.
It's not. And in 1978, I bet a packet of Kool-Aid was like
2 cents,
3 cents.
Yeah, fuck you.
Kool-Aid exist
fuck you, Jim Jones.
Surely there was Kool-Aid in 1976.
Yeah, actually, I saw some of videos where he was showing people their stash. And there was like, he opened this thing and there was like name brand Kool-Aid in there, but there was also Flavor Aid. So who knows which one he used.
He just grabbed.
Whatever.
I see when you said that I was picturing that it was all like Dharma Initiative style stuff.
But the thing of it is, there were people there that didn't want to die. So he started with the children. He had the children literally... They took syringes without needles in them and actually started squirting the poison into the children's mouths.
Horrible.
And then the people that didn't want to die, that were fighting, they actually held them down, either forced them to drink or injected them with it.
Yep.
And eventually, except for there were 33 members of the People's Temple survived, both from the airstrip and there. So there was a group of people that actually escaped into the jungle. But for the most part, over 900 died.
Yes. Which at the time was unprecedented.
A very, and Jim Jones couldn't even be bothered to die the same way as his flock. He always had to be special. He had a single gunshot wound to the head. There's been discrepancies about whether he shot himself or he had a security guard shoot him. But there were interviews with his son, one of his sons, that said knowing his father, as arrogant as his father could never have standed to harm himself. So he's willing to bet he had someone shoot him.
I mean, that tracks for me, but
yeah. And so they were found the next day. At once, the survivors of the airstrip actually got on the plane's radio and radioed for help. And the Guyanese police and the American embassy got there the next day. And from They were actually, from what I understand, going to go in with like a police force with guns because they had just committed a murder. So they were
Yeah,
going to,
yeah.
the Guyanese, United States and Guyanese were going to go in with a joint force to take them by force. And they flew over and said it looked like confetti on the ground. And, well, we know what.
Jesus.
There was actually one 76-year-old woman. This woman had balls. She actually hid under
She
her
what?
bed. She had balls. She hid under her bunk when they called the white knight.
Yeah.
And she just laid there until she didn't hear any more noise. But can you imagine?
I can't. You would just never be the same after that.
No, I can't
In
imagine.
a
And
very serious, real way.
if you watch any of the documentaries that have some of the survivors, it will literally break you up every time. Because all of them, I think, of course, they mourn the deaths of their families and their friends, but I think more than anything, mourn the death of a dream, because every single one of them joined with the intention of creating a utopia on Earth,
Oh,
and
yeah.
this is the way it ended.
Yeah. So, it's a really great story up there till the end.
It is. I mean, I can get by.
It's very entertaining up until
if this had
that
ended,
end part.
if this had ended with Jones being found out for all the scumfuckery he did and been arrested at the end and served a long jail sentence, I would have ended this with sheeple, don't do that kind of shit. But with this, with the way it ended,
joke, but instead,
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it goes back to interesting. Why do people join cults, and why do people stay in cults that are obviously cults, especially when you get to the extremes of the People's Temple? Why do people stay in that? Especially in America. If you're still in America, you can walk right out. Okay.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a mixture of preying on desperate people who feel like they have nowhere else to turn. And then we as humans have this natural inclination. It's like the sunk cost fallacy. Where you're like, well, I've been here for this long.
Yeah.
What am I gonna do? It's very similar. I would say identical to the psychology of like a battered spouse.
Yeah, exactly.
Who feels like they
he
can't
really
leave their
loves
partner.
me. Yeah.
He really does. It's not always like this. He's done so much for me.
Exactly.
I was on drugs and I would have died if I hadn't come
to Jim Jones
to be with the family.
Well, yeah, I get that. And also you have to think of all the elderly people that were there, that their entire, like, they had sold their homes and gave the money to him. They had their Social Security checks and went to him. So literally they had nothing.
Well, so a lot of economic coercion in that way. But also when you isolate people from their whole support systems, after a while, people will believe you when you say, like, well, your family hasn't come for you yet, so you think they're going to want you now?
Exactly.
Like, and
a lot of the recordings
that they won't.
A lot of the recordings from Jonestown are him bad talking people's families, encouraging anger toward their families.
Yes,
that kind of thing.
And I mean, and those are the ways that you psychologically manipulate people into doing stuff. From the outside, it seems so impossible, but like, I think anyone is under the right set of circumstances. I think anyone is susceptible.
Exactly. Oh yeah. I shouldn't be that judgy. I wasn't trying to be. I guess looking at it from where we are at this point in my life, I don't think I could get drawn into a cult, but who knows if circumstances were different. I've been really down on my luck. There was a period of about a month I lived out of my vehicle for certain circumstances. This was a long time ago. During that time, I could have been very susceptible to a cold.
Absolutely. They're going to give you a warm bed and a
food. Yeah.
Food. Yeah, absolutely.
So
that's.
Yeah. And one thing we didn't mention that we should have is while they were at Jonestown, literally Jim Jones was their only link with the outside world. He got all the news, all the newspapers, all the radio broadcasts came directly to him, and he would listen to them and then turn around and reinterpret the news for his followers. So his followers had no idea what was actually going on in the world. He was telling them things like all Western countries are rounding up non-whites and putting them in concentration camps. That was literal shit he told people. So they probably thought that was true. There was only a hellscape to go back to. You know?
And why wouldn't they? Because honestly, it seems like for a while there at the beginning, for a lot of people who were there the whole time, he was fulfilling his promises to them.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? They had incredible political power. They had a place to live. They had all this stuff.
All their needs taken care of, you know?
So why wouldn't you believe him at that? Exactly. I don't know. I didn't think you sounded judgy. It just seems unfathomable from where we're sitting as like
exactly
relatively healthy people.
Yeah, you know,
loving families.
Like with the Mansons, which we will do eventually, like the Manson family, with those people, there was a whole lot of mental illness going on there throughout that entire cult.
Including their dear leader.
Especially their leader.
Especially the leader.
But with this, there was definite mental illness with Jim Jones. But for the most part, I mean, most of his followers, from what I've seen, I'm not trying to denormalize mental illness, but from the most part, all the interviews I've seen and stories I've read about actual temple members, they were just your average people like you and me. They had average everyday problems and, you know, average levels of mental illness. You know, they weren't crazy by any means.
It's like the frog in the water,
right?
You know,
definitely.
Where it's like at first, because at first they're just like living this dream or whatever in this beautiful, water. Refreshing water, and then all of a sudden they're like, "We're doing what now?"
All of a sudden you're boiling. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. All of a sudden you're boiling, and a bunch of slave raid.
Yep.
Ridiculous.
Well, anyway, that's the saga of Jonestown.
The real tragedy.
Yeah, definitely.
Of Jonestown.
There's a lot of great documentaries about it on YouTube, everyone. Some really great ones. Even the old 1980s movie with Powers Booth is on there in its entirety.
Look up who that is, and I'm sure that once I'm doing it right now.
Just Google Jim Jones Powers Booth. You will be amazed.
Booth, Jim Jones. This is very fun for people to listen to, me Googling. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yep.
I don't think that I've ever seen this Powers Booth person though.
See, I had a crush on him as a kid. So not from the Jim Jones story. I was just shocked when I saw the Jim Jones story. But I fell in love with him in Red Dawn. He was the downed Air Force pilot that helped the Wolverines.
I have never seen this person before in my life.
Yeah. So he's a great actor. He really was. He passed away not long ago.
Well, anyway, we did it.
We did it. Jonestown, People's Temple.
Jonestown and the People's Temple and Jonestown.
So I think next week I'm going to do, since I just did Columbine, I'm going to start recording here.
Oh, okay.
Since I just